thank you all so much. Yes, thank you for joining us for our Sex Talk Advocates number 8 on parenting. This is a webinar presentation hosted by the Sexual Health SIG for AUCD. And so we're really excited to have all you all today, those of you that are joining us. So we're going to introduce our main presenter panelists so that you all know who's on our planning committee with us. First, I'm Lindsay Mullis. I am one of the co-chairs of the SIG. My other Lindsay with me.
Hi everyone, this is Lindsay Sauvé. I'm the co-chair with Lindsay Mullis of the AUCD Sexual Health SIG. Welcome, excited to do our 8th of the Sex Talk series for self-advocates about parenting. Should we just go ahead and get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
And just a quick reminder for those of you who are on audio, if you wouldn't mind just muting yourselves. We're gonna have time for Q&A at the end where you can unmute yourself and ask a question, but for the presentation part, if you wouldn't mind just clicking that mute button so there isn't any audio feedback, that would be great. Thank you. All right.
So our first main presenter is Max Barrows, who's an outreach director for Green Mountain Self Advocates, a position he's had since 2007. He mentors youth and adults with developmental disabilities to speak up for themselves and become leaders. GMSA is a lead partner of the Self-Advocacy Resource and Technical Assistance Center. He leads technical assistance teams in assisting local and state advocacy organizations across the nation. Max connects with people on all levels, advocating for true inclusion of people with developmental disabilities. He received a White House Champions of Change Award in his work in 2015, and he's an accomplished self-advocate from Vermont who served on a board of members for self-advocates, becoming empowered from 2008 to 2016.
We also have Catherine McLaughlin joining us. Catherine is a national expert and trains individuals, staff, and parents on sexuality and developmental disabilities. She teaches sexuality education to people with DDID, as well as trains them to be peer sexuality educators themselves. Catherine is the author of an agency and school curriculum, Sexuality Education for People with Developmental Disabilities, and has developed 2 online courses, one to train professionals, Developmental Disability and Sexuality 101, and one for parents, Talking to Your Kids, Developmental Disabilities and Sexuality. You can get a hold of Catherine through her business, Elevatus Training.
And then lastly, we have Erica Thomas. Her master's is the Education and Outreach Specialist at RCM of Washington in Washington, D.C. At RCM, she facilitates the Direct Support Professional Academy, where she mentors future DSPs. Erica delivers person-centered health education coaching sessions with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities on an array of wellness topics. She serves as a liaison between family members, healthcare professionals, and community providers that support people with disabilities. Erica advocates for supports and assists people with navigating the healthcare system. Erica also develops and implements healthcare information curriculum and education sessions, including topics such as sexuality and intimacy, healthy relationships, and community safety for people with disabilities and their support teams. When she's not advocating for people with disabilities, she enjoys traveling the world when she can and spending time with her wonderful baby boy.
Awesome. All right, so just to get us started, we want to set the stage for just how we've formatted these webinars. First of all, we tend to stick to using person-first language and just knowing that there's other ways to identify folks and other ways that folks like to be identified, but that's how we have, that's the approach that we're taking in these webinars. We also want to be aware of using gender neutral language. So for the most part, we're going to be talking about parenting today. We're going to be talking about how babies are made and who carries a baby and who delivers a baby. And I think, you know, typically that would be a woman, but we know that there are many cases where, for instance, transgender men also can carry and deliver babies. So we just want to acknowledge that and acknowledge that where possible, we use gender neutral language to not assume the gender identity of a person who might be having a baby. And we want to acknowledge that when we talk about, if we may say woman, like the woman having a baby, we want to acknowledge that we really mean that person with a uterus. So whether that person was assigned a woman at birth or identifies as a different gender, that's the language that we're using, and acknowledging that there are many ways to identify. We also want to share that for all of these Sex Talk webinars, we collected questions and information from the self-advocate community across the AUCD network. So we have organized this information and presented this information and asked panelists questions that are in the words of those self-advocates, and really like looking to our community for what self-advocates across this AUCD network want to learn and want to know about this topic. So it really is framed from the perspective of self-advocates in their own words. All right, moving on. We also just want to acknowledge that talking about relationships and sexuality, talking about parenting or having babies, they're very personal topics. And sometimes talking about these things can just, bring up really strong feelings, bring up memories for some people. So we want to acknowledge that that can happen and that's okay. And the best thing to do if that happens to you is to, talk with somebody about it, somebody that you know, that you trust, someone in your life. It could be a parent or a friend or a sibling or a support provider. Other things that you can do if you experience strong emotions listening to this webinar is you can turn the volume down during certain times. So if you hear something that causes a strong emotion in you and you just want to not listen during that time, you can turn the volume down. You can also just leave the webinar if you need to. This webinar is going to be recorded and you can always come back and watch it at a different time. So if you get to a point where you are feeling something strong and you don't want to keep participating, that's okay. It's always okay to just log off. And if you experience feelings or emotions that are really strong, that you're having a hard time dealing with, this number that's listed here is a national crisis call center, and there's people there that can help you and talk to you about those strong feelings and emotions. So the number is 1-800-273-8255. All righty.
For your comments and questions throughout the webinar, feel free to use the chat box. You can send them to everyone or to one of the individual presenters or panelists directly, and then we will answer those at the end of the webinar. We'll have time to be able to pull that together. And so if you want to have your question asked anonymously, feel free to ask me privately. You can do that for where my camera is on your screen. There's 3 little dots there next to where my face is, and you can click that and chat with me privately, or in the chat box you can find my name, and you can do that individually. We'll make sure to get all your questions answered at the end of the webinar today. So again, on the next slide, we're talking about how this will work. Our questions have been submitted by self-advocates from across the nation. So we took that survey and worked with Max, Erica, and Catherine to bring the content together and find some wonderful panelists to talk about parenting today. So we have one educator will lead a bit of the content to talk about answering some of those questions. And then Max today is going to lead the discussion with our esteemed panelists. And we'll be going a little bit back and forth between asking them questions, then talking about content that answers some of the self-advocate questions as well. And then we'll answer your questions at the end of the webinar. As we mentioned before, this is our 8th one. So we do have 7 of these archived with AUCD. We've talked about a lot of great topics that have answered all those questions from self-advocates. So the links are here, and I will also be adding the into the chat box, and they're also accessible on the archives of the AUCD webinars on their website. So if there's another interesting topic to you, feel free to check those out.
So I'm going to introduce Raisin and Colette, and they've been on our webinars a couple of times. So we keep asking them back because they're so great. But Raisin is a proud self-advocate and was diagnosed as autistic during adulthood. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and chemistry and a master's of science in forensic science. She is a few courses away from completing her master's in public health and epidemiology, a timely choice in the year of the pandemic. When not working or studying, Raisin enjoys spending time in nature, knitting, reading, and trying to make the perfect homemade waffle. Colette is a coach and facilitator working at the intersection of conflict transformation and racial equity. She holds a bachelor's degree in anthropology and African-American studies, as well as a master's of science in conflict analysis and resolution. In her spare time, she enjoys being in nature, writing, and keeping her lemon tree alive. And they'll be sharing some of their thoughts about parenting in a little bit.
I believe.
Kara, I don't have a bio to read for you, so is it okay if I turn the mic over to let you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure.
Great. Okay.
So I am Kara Ayers, and at work, I work at a UCED, which some of you all may be familiar with. I'm the Associate Director of our University of Cincinnati UCED. But at home, I am the mom of these 3 kids that are pictured. So I have a 13-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a now 3-year-old. So we're a very busy house, and my husband and I both have disabilities. We have osteogenesis imperfecta. So it means that our bones break easier than most people's, and we use a wheelchair, or we use 2 wheelchairs, thankfully, for mobility. So yeah, that's our little family.
And I'm in the same boat as Lindsay. Bernard, I don't have a bio for you, but we have these lovely pictures of you with your kids. Bernard, would you like to introduce yourself and tell everyone about yourself?
Yes, my name is Bernard Crawford. I'm a parent and with my 3 kids, and you see the picture of me and my son together, and my 2 daughters, and the mother of my son, and I'm a parent and I'm a dad and everything else, raising these kids, the 2 daughters of mine, and me and the mother of my son, we and her try to raise him and everything else. That's all I'm gonna say. I'll turn over to.
And just really fast, in this first picture here with Bernard with the DC in the background, he is actually appointed by the mayor to a special position for district residents involving people with disabilities. And so he's there with his son. We were all celebrating Bernard that day. Thanks, Bernard.
Mm-hmm.
And my guest is Hillary Christian, and I have a bio for her. And Hillary is a mother of a first grader. They both live in Middlesex, Vermont, with Hillary's parents. Hillary graduated from Union 32 High School. She loves reading romance novels. And during the summer, Hillary volunteers at games for the local baseball team, the Mountaineers. She has been involved with self-advocacy since high school. So with that said, we're gonna kick things off with, the first panel question. So this question is, first of all, people with disabilities ask questions that they would like to learn more about. And our panelists will answer these questions that they have submitted. So this first question is around how you came up with the decision about having children or not to have children. So with that, how did you come with the decision about having children or not having children. I'm going to start, and of course, going to go in order with Raisin and Colette because they were the first ones that were introduced. Go ahead.
Okay. I knew when it's good to see you, Max. Actually, I wanted to say
Thanks.
I knew when I was 12 that I didn't want to be a mom. And that never really went away. I saw a movie in high school biology that completely freaked me out. It was a childbirth video, and I knew, oh yeah, I'm definitely not doing this. But the real consideration for me was whether I felt like I could provide the amount of attention that I think a child deserves. And I just feel like the fact that I need a lot of alone time and I need a lot of quiet for me isn't compatible with being the type of parent that I would want to be.
And I think to add that, in terms of us coming to that together, you know, she was really clear before we got married that she didn't want children. I didn't really have feelings like one way or the other. So it made it, you know, I think a pretty easy decision since I didn't really have strong feelings about it.
Well, thank you very much. Let's go to Kara Eras next.
Yeah. I think, you know, I had always wanted to be a mom, but wasn't sure how that worked with my physical disability, and also kind of got the message from other people, even if they didn't directly tell me, that that wasn't something that they thought that I should do. And I didn't see many people with disabilities that were parents, so I just didn't know if that was a possibility. But when my husband and I got married, we both, you know, talked about that we both wanted to be parents. We weren't totally sure how. So we started looking for more parents with disabilities and asking them lots of questions. And I think the other part of this question, once we decided we wanted to become parents, deciding when to become parents is important. So for me, the toddler phase is really hard because I'm in a wheelchair, as is my husband, and two of our kids do not have disabilities and one does. But so keeping up with a toddler, even though I wanted more than one child, I realized that having two babies or two little ones at that age would be really hard for my disability. So I think this question is a tricky one because for us, it wasn't only about whether we wanted children, but also what were kind of like timing and what were good times with our life so that we would be able to take care of them as we wanted to.
Thank you very much. Next, how about I go to Bernard Crawford?
Yes, this is me. It's hard for me I took the child's I took the parents classes how to raise kids, and let you know I did that. Show me how to, you know, how to be a parent for my son and stuff. I took the parents class and it taught me something how to, you know, raise a kid up, how to be a father, how to change this, how to change pampers, and it took me a while to do that, and I learned it, and that's what I did is how to change, how to do things to be a parent. And also I wanted to learn, and that's what I did. And the same thing with my son and daughter. That's what I want to be there for them and see them grow and you know, be there for them. That's what I want to do.
Thank you very much, Bernard. And then I am going to go to Hillary, and the same question is asked of you. How did you come to the decision of having children or not? And to make it easier for you, Hillary, did you want to have a family? And if so, when?
Well, I did actually want one when I got older, but this pregnancy wasn't planned at all. It was a really big surprise to me and my partner. And it was a crazy when I found out, but we wanted to keep her. We didn't think about adopt or abortion or anything like that. So we just made a decision like that.
All right. So I was directed to ask the question again, and that is, how did you come to the decision about having children or not having children?
I think that was from me, Max, because when Bernard and I were practicing beforehand, he had told me about how he and his partner actually talked about having children together. So Bernard, do you want to talk a little bit more about that? How you and your partner talked about having kids?
Oh, sorry, I got it mixed up. I thought you
That's
were
okay, Max.
directing
No
your-
problem.
me.
No problem.
Yes, that's a good idea to talk about that, having kids, how we having kids. Me and my partner, we was it was on me. It was on me first. Well, me and my partner, we was talking about it, and I went up to her apartment where she was living at, and me and her was talking, and later on she said, "Yeah, but let's go have a relationship," and we started rolling, and we started, I started having sex with her, and later on after that, I walked her back to where she was living at, and she told the staff she was with, the lady she was living with, she told her, "Yeah, I'm gonna walk him to the bus stop," and later on, me and her, she walked me to the bus stop, and I caught the bus, went home. Later on, I didn't know what was going on. Later on, she said, "Bernard, what?" I said, "What?" She called me up and she said, "Bernard, guess what happened? I'm pregnant." And after that, I said, "Oh, you is?" "Yes." I said, "Oh, good." And later on, me and her, we sit down and talking about it. We gonna have, and she said, "Yeah, Bernard, I'm gonna have me a, yeah." We sit down and talk about it. I said, "What kind of baby you gonna have, a boy or a girl?" She said, "Bernard, I'm carrying a boy." And we talking, we work things out, and later on, she started having a child, and she went into before she
Bernard,
had.
I'm gonna stop you right there because you're getting into the questions later on, so you're going to give away all of our magic. So
No, I'm not getting your message away. I'm not getting your message away yet.
Okay. All right. So but pause right there, and then we're going to get into that later on. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Bernard.
What?
So I guess it's back to me. If I could get a time check, that would be great. I just want to make sure I'm.
So I might be having some internet. This is Lindsay Sauvé, and I advanced the slide to the next one, how our baby's made, and I'm wondering if people can see that slide.
I can.
Yes, I can.
Okay, good, because my internet froze. I wasn't sure.
Oh, you're just testing out your internet? Okay.
So I think Catherine's taking this one.
Yeah, you get to have a little break, Max.
All right.
Yes. So a couple things I was thinking about when I was listening to the panel is that sometimes people plan pregnancies, right? Like Kara was talking about talking to other people and thinking about it, and Raisin and Colette were talking about, well, maybe we don't want this. And then sometimes people get pregnant and these things happen and they become pleasant surprises. So sometimes people aren't planning to become pregnant, but they get pregnant and then they decide what to do next as well. So it's kind of a mix of how people make the decision too. So I'm going to talk briefly about how babies are made. And just to kind of remind everyone, we did these slides back in our, I believe, contraception webinar. But really, sperm plus egg equals baby, right? So the sperm, they're like little teeny tadpoles, fertilize the egg. And that's really how a baby's made. That's how a baby starts. So first you need the semen, which is fluid and sperm, and that comes from the testicles. And I'll show you some pictures. And that gets ejaculated or pushed into the vagina. And the egg is inside the ovaries. So I'll show you pictures of that as well. And this is usually how babies are made, as far as ejaculation and fertilization. But if the sperm meets the egg and fertilizes it, a baby can begin. And that means the person's pregnant. And there's a baby growing inside the uterus. So I can move to the next slide. So just to show you here, this is a person, this is a side view. This is a person that has a penis. And we talked about sperm, and that comes from the testicles. So they're made in the testicles, and they travel up the tube and mix with fluids. And then the semen comes out of the penis. So that's how the sperm comes out. And then the next slide, you can see that we talked about an egg, and they're really tiny eggs. If you take a pen and you make a mark on a piece of paper, that's how big those eggs are. So they're not eggs like the kind you crack and scramble and eat. They're much smaller. And you can see they're in the ovaries, and about once a month, they travel down the tube. And if there's sperm inside of the uterus after coming from the penis, a baby can start. Next slide. And this is usually how sperm meets the egg, but we'll talk about some other ways too. So you can see that the person on the top has a penis and it's going inside the vagina. And then the semen comes out, the fluid with the sperm, and it meets the egg. And that's usually how it happens. If you go to the next slide, I'm just going to show you, you can see a little bit more here. So you can see the penis inside, and then the fluid comes out and would meet the egg. So it shows you there. There's also other ways that the sperm and the egg get together. You can go to the next slide. So one way, it's called artificial insemination. And so what it is instead of the semen coming out of the penis, the semen is injected into the vagina or into the uterus. And that's called an artificial insemination. So sometimes that's how a sperm meets the egg. And then another way, if we can go to the next slide, is that you take the sperm and you take the egg outside of the bodies and you mix them together outside of the body. And then you put them back into the uterus. The baby that's starting to grow goes back into the uterus. And that's called in vitro fertilization. So these are things that you need to go to a medical provider for, the artificial insemination and the in vitro fertilization. But like I said, it's usually, the sperm meets the egg usually from vaginal intercourse. So the penis goes into the vagina.
Okay, may I ask a question about that for a minute?
Yeah.
Okay, may I ask you a question about that? I'm looking at, I heard this before. A person can't make a baby, and they're trying their best to making a baby, and they shoot in and don't make a baby. Some people say you either freeze the person, sperm, and put it inside to a lady and freeze. I'm hearing somebody say you either freeze it and put it up inside of the lady and let the lady know she's pregnant from that. That's what I want to know about that. Do I?
Yeah.
And I'm hearing it. I'm looking at it on a show that it was saying you to freeze the egg from. You to freeze the person sperm and put it up into a woman anyway, and let the lady let her know the lady's pregnant anyway.
Yeah. So yes,
I didn't know. I'm asking that question. No, I didn't know nothing about that. I didn't know nothing about it. That's why I'm asking. That's why I'm glad we're doing this now. That's why I'm asking this question about it. Anyway, and the person. Okay, there's another way too. I'm asking two more questions about it.
Okay.
A person chooses his tie. That's what I want to answer that question. A person chooses his tie, and a person shoot the sperm up there, and the chooses tie and make a baby in that way too. That's what I want to know about that and why.
Yeah.
We want to know that this tie and needs to come loose.
This tie. I don't know what you mean by this tie.
Okay, it's like, okay, somebody chooses tie inside.
Oh,
And the person, right, and then later on, a person doing it to the person tie and this tie and it come loose, they still make a baby that way too?
yeah, if the where you talk about tying grows back together, sometimes you can make a baby that way. But
okay, and what happened to person chooses burnt? It's
right.
burnt.
It says yes.
And later on, it's still tied. And later on, they'll still try to make a baby anyway. That's what we want to. I want to know about that. That's how I want to answer you that question.
Okay, so let me just say a couple things. All right. So, like you said, sometimes the sperm goes in. I think you said shoots in, and the baby starts. Sometimes the sperm doesn't swim fast enough, or different things, and so you have to try to get them together. And so that's what you were watching stuff about freezing sperm and then putting it in and all of that. So that is one way, but it usually happens when people are having trouble making babies, like they want to have a baby and they can't.
Right.
Yeah, and then I think you're talking about like if someone gets a vasectomy or their tubes tied, it's called. That's to make it so they don't make babies, so they can have vaginal sex and not make a baby. But sometimes those things aren't. Sometimes they grow back together. Sometimes people, so sometimes you can get pregnant that way, but it's really unlikely that you get pregnant if you had your tubes tied or the vasectomy.
Okay, what happened? Okay, they didn't have the septomy. I'm saying what happened? I'm saying what happened? They didn't have the septomy, and the tied and burnt anyway. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So Bernard, what I think we should do is we'll keep going with this and talk about parenting, and then we'll save all. Like at the end, we'll talk about all the questions that come up. Okay.
Okay.
So keep them in your brain, or write them down, or whatever you want to do. Don't forget them.
Yeah, if you've got questions, make sure you put them in the chat box, and I'll pull them together for our panelists.
Right. And then Bernard, this is gonna, this is crazy too, right? Who knew? Sometimes people have a baby where the sperm and the egg get put together, and then it goes inside somebody else's body, and they grow the baby for them. So there's lots of ways for babies to be born and grow. Yeah. So just think about that for a while, huh? Okay, so I think that was it for me. And then I think Erica is going to talk about childbirth. So everybody keep your questions and we'll talk about them at the end.
If I could figure out how to get off mute. So just again, as we talked about earlier, so when I refer to a mother, or if I refer to a person having a baby, it's a person who was born with a uterus. So with childbirth, it's the same thing as if someone says, I'm having a baby. So someone's like, oh, I'm having a baby. So that's what it means. The person with the uterus is going to have a baby. And when the baby is born, it's going to come out of her vagina, and that's called a vaginal birth. Or it could be a situation where maybe it was an emergency and the baby had to get out like now, or maybe someone chooses to have it done this way, and it's called a cesarean. And that means that on the person's stomach, there's a small incision that's made, and then the baby is actually taken out of the mother's stomach. So it's not coming through the uterus and out of the vagina, but it's actually going to be pulled from out of the stomach. And that has to be done by a doctor. So that's a surgical procedure. Next slide, please. And so again, with childbirth, it just doesn't, well, some people, it depends on the person, it can happen. So all people are different, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But when a woman is ready to have her baby, she goes through a process that's called labor. And so that's the process of giving birth. And labor can mean a person is going to have contractions, which are when the muscles in the uterus are going to like tighten and expand. And so it'll tighten up really, really tight, and then it'll relax. And so basically that motion of tightening up and relaxing is the baby coming down. Okay, so coming down the uterus on its way out of the vagina. So there might be some leaking of fluid or bleeding from the vagina. There may be a low or a dull backache that the woman may have, and then there may be some cramping. And so a lot of times it's described as having like extreme menstrual pains. So again, it depends on the person. It may be no pain associated with it, or it may be excruciating pain, and someone may need medication to help them to pass the baby safely without any pain. So again, the pain thresholds, it just all depends on the person. Next slide, please. And so with labor, there are 3 different stages. So we talked about the contraction. So that's from when the uterus is going to tighten and relax. And then it's going to move into what's called the active stage. And so that's when the contractions are increasing. They're getting, faster and faster. They're now back to back. And that means that the baby is well on its way out. So you can see in the picture that the baby's head is coming out of the vagina. And that's when the baby is delivered. And so then you're not done. You have to deliver the placenta. So once the baby comes out and, oh, hey, you're so cute, you're adorable, go get cleaned up and all that good stuff, you still have to deliver what's called the placenta. And that is the part that's connected to the mother. And when we talk about the umbilical cord, if you heard of the umbilical cord or your belly button, so that's how the mother feeds the baby while the baby is inside of her. And so all of that has to be passed out as well. So once the baby comes out, the placenta has to be passed out as well. Next slide, please. And like we had said, all people are different. So the length of time that a woman is in labor is going to depend on her. It's going to depend on, how she's made up. There's no rhyme or reason to it, right? The length of time it takes to deliver a baby, again, it all depends on the person. There is no right or wrong time frame. So, if it happens quickly, that's fine. If it takes, a long time, that's fine. As long as you're safe, as long as your doctors are taking care of you, it doesn't matter, right? And just all women, so all of us, again, when we're talking about women in this context, we're talking about people who were born with the uterus. Everyone is different. Everyone is amazing. Everyone's story is different and amazing. And then, if I can just circle right back around. So again, we can talk about childbirth lasting minutes. We can talk about it lasting hours. And then a woman can choose to give birth in different places. So if she wants to give birth at home, if she wants to give birth in a hospital, and something like that I saw that was really, really cool was giving birth in water. So there are many options that are out there for a woman to have a baby in the setting that she wants to have a baby in, her comfort level. Next slide, please. So this is a cool question, because I had this question too, right? What do babies eat? So when a baby is born, you just can't start giving the baby food. You just can't start giving it chicken or vegetables or whatever else, right? So a baby should be fed only breast milk or formula, right? So no solid foods. So when a baby gets his food from his mother, that's called breastfeeding. So we can see in the picture here with the baby and, they're together. And so the baby is actually sucking on his mother's or his or her mother's breast. And that's how the baby gets fed through breast milk. And the cool thing about breast milk is it has everything, all of the nutrients, everything that baby needs to live and thrive and survive, right? But, let me circle back around. So a baby is going to suck on the mother's breast and the milk is going to come out. And so only a mother can breastfeed. So a man or a person born with a penis cannot breastfeed. But there are really cool little contraptions and things that, a mother can do what's called pumping. So she can hook herself up to a machine that will physically pump the milk out of her breast. And so that milk can go into a bottle. And then the father can, feed the baby with the bottle, or he can hook up something to his chest and put the nipple of the bottle through there. So if he wants to have that experience, or, depending on the partner, if the partner wants to have that experience with breastfeeding, then they can do that as well. Next slide, please. Oh,
hold up. Wait a minute. Say that part is again. You said you hook up the machine to a man and still do the same thing too?
Say, Bernard, let's hold on to that question for the end, okay? That's a really good question. But let's talk about that at the end.
Figure that out. Good.
Don't forget it, okay? Okay. So breastfeeding, again, we talked about the different nutrients and all that are in the breast milk. And also breast milk is going to help to defend the child against infections, prevent allergies, and protect against some chronic conditions. Next slide, please. So more about what babies eat. So some mothers cannot breastfeed and some mothers choose not to breastfeed. And guess what? We're all different. That's okay, right? That's totally fine. So in that case, the baby can drink what's called formula. So a formula is an alternative to breast milk. So it can come in a liquid form or it can come in a powder form, right? So the liquid, you just take it out the bottle, you shake it up and boom, it's ready. Or the powder form, you measure the powder, then you measure the water, then you shake it up and then it's ready, right? A baby must drink breast milk or formula like we talked about. And then you should never make your own milk. So you just can't go in the kitchen and like whip up something and feed it to your baby. You want to make sure that the baby is having either breast milk or having formula. And then going back to breast milk one more time, because this thought just came into my head. Some mothers produce an abundance of milk. So they produce a lot of breast milk. And sometimes people donate their breast milk to mothers who want to breastfeed their children. And so that's an option if you're interested in that. If you really want to, feed your baby breast milk and you can't produce breast milk or you don't produce breast milk. So that's an option to formula as well. Next slide, please. So you can start to introduce, so breast milk and formula 1 year, at least 1 year, right? So after that, so maybe at about 4 months to 6 months, you can start to introduce what's called solid food. So it's not like you're giving your baby a whole carrot or a whole celery. So it's like, have you seen the little pouches? And they can like squeeze, or like baby food where you can use a spoon and feed your baby, like rice cereal, oatmeal, things like that. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about solid foods. So it's not really solid food, but it's food that's not milk or breast milk, right? So again, you can still breastfeed or offer formula with the solid food until the baby is at least 1. And then solid foods, again, some examples are pureed fruits and pureed vegetables. And then if at any time you have any questions about what you're feeding your baby, how much you're going to feed your baby, what to feed your baby, allergies, anything like that, you can always talk to your child's pediatrician about those specific questions. And I think that's it for me.
All right. So we did have a question from Self Advocates. What if there are 2 dads or 2 moms? And people who are in same-sex relationships can have babies too. And there's some different ways that people who are in same-sex relationships can have children. Adoption is definitely one of those. And I think Lindsay and Kara are going to talk about adoption in a couple slides and what that is like, what that experience is like. Also, joining families or step parenting. So if one partner had children from a previous relationship and then got together with a new partner, and the new partner could be a step parent to those children. So that's like blended families or joining families. Also surrogacy, which Catherine mentioned, which is having the sperm and an egg put into another person's body, and then that person has the baby. Or artificial insemination is another way that 2 dads or 2 moms or 2 people in same-sex relationship can have a baby. And I was going to show a video. I don't know if any of you are aware of the Amaze videos. There's a really great one on how LGBTQ couples have babies. I want to do a quick time check though. It's 4 minutes long. And it's also something we can just put in the chat and folks can watch on their own if we want to move on with the presentation. Have about 45 minutes left. What do folks think? What do you think, Lindsay?
I think we can add it to the chat box and make sure we have enough time for all the panelists to answer the questions and for all the questions for you all participants to get answered. And that way you all can still access it, and we'll make sure that when the recording and the slides are shared, that the link to the video is included as well.
That was my feeling too. I feel like we kind of need to move along with hearing from our health educators and panelists. So I will go ahead and put that video link in the chat so you can watch it on your own.
Great. And so Lindsay already introduced us a little bit for myself and for Kara, talking about adoption. We each, and I love that the picture that Kara shared to put on the slide is of her and her kiddos in the sunflower field. And I happen to have one of those from the summer as well. So you don't have to be in a sunflower field with your adopted kiddos. It just happened to be that way. But and so for my experience in looking at and talking about adoption, that's the act of legally taking something on as your own, the legal process of becoming a non-biological parent. So for the picture there that you can see on the left, that is Caroline. We adopted her from China. She has Down syndrome. She'll be 8 years old in March. And so that was our process of adopting Caroline from a foreign country and bringing her home into our family. And then her sister Marcella there is a biological child of mine. So we've experienced both adoption and childbirth. And so, I think the important things to think about, and Kara can speak about how some parents with disabilities adopt children, the domestic versus international. So domestic meaning within the United States versus where we got Caroline from, an international country, and how adoption is different for everyone. So I know for my story, we did the process very quickly. It's a lot of paperwork and a lot of going through waiting times in federal buildings and getting fingerprinted more times than you should for not being a criminal, answering a lot of questions and doing interviews. And so there's a lot of different processes, and each adoption agency has their own unique processes, as well as each country or the way that you're adopting. So just recognizing that it is a very unique process. But Caroline, even though she might look different and not be blonde like Marcella or I, she's just as an important part of our family as anybody else. And so I think it's important to mention that. And I'll turn the mic over to Kara to let her talk a little bit about her adoption story and let her talk about this slide after this as well.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is our family. So we had my daughter Hannah, who is actually younger than Eli, and then we adopted Eli when she was about 4. And we also adopted from China. And as parents with disabilities, we were asked a lot of specific questions about, how we would care for him. And we explained that because we have a disability that is somewhat similar to his, we knew of the doctors that he should see, and we had many friends that have the same disability as he does, so he would have people to look up to and kids to play with. So we also explained that being parents with disabilities would be a strength for Eli. But there were a lot of hard questions to answer, and one of the reasons that we pursued this route, which is international adoption for us, is that in the United States, it's a little bit harder of a road for parents with disabilities in some ways, in that the birth parent or the biological parent makes the decisions upon birth if it's a newborn adoption. And many times people don't think that parents with disabilities will do as good of a job. I don't think that's the case, but birth parents have a right to choose on all kinds of different reasons. So that was one of the reasons that we chose international, but it is a very lengthy and hard process, and it's not for everyone, but I'm really glad that we built our family in this way. And then about 3 years later, we welcomed Riley. So Eli is right in the middle in how he came into our family, but he's the oldest of my 3 kids. And I think the next slide has some additional information as well, that tells about, so it's hard to know how many parents with disabilities there are out there, because some people technically have disabilities. So maybe they received special services in school, or their doctor would mark a form to say they have a disability. But when you ask them if they have a disability, they may not feel like that's an important part of who they are. So it's really hard to get a number on that. For me, I am proud to be a parent with a disability, so I would say yes, but I know of other people that have the same medical disability that I have that would say no. So it's tricky. But we think that there are around 4.1 million parents with disabilities, and that's a lot. So that means that about 1 in 10 kids have at least one of their parents has a disability. So it's a lot more families than we think of. If you're thinking about parenting, you're definitely not alone. And when we look at especially among people considering pregnancy. People with disabilities now are thinking about it about as much as people without disabilities. So this is a really common, typical question for you to have if you're thinking about it. And again, you're not alone. So more people are trying to decide whether they want to become parents, and more people are finding them in a position as parents with disabilities, whether they plan to or not, and they're figuring out ways to do that successfully. So I think that one of my favorite parts of being a parent with a disability is that I do know now that I'm not alone, and our community is full of amazing people that have really creative ideas. And, I see their kids are amazing as well, whether they have disabilities or not. So it gives me a lot of hope about the future generations that are not only going to know of people with disabilities because maybe they read a book or they were taught about them, but thinking about how powerful it is when your mom or dad had a disability and the attitude that that gives you about accepting people. And so that's my favorite part about being a parent with a disability, is the community that I share.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Kara. I think it's really important to point out that people with disabilities do have the right to have children. There are no laws that I'm aware of that say that a person with a disability is not allowed to have children, but some states do have laws that can limit a person's right to care for their own children. And so this is really different based on state laws. It's going to be very different based on where a person lives. But it's just really important to point out that everyone needs support to raise children, whether a parent has a disability or not. And it's important for everyone, whether they have a disability or not, to know about the responsibilities of raising children before deciding to have them. So I think learning about what it takes and those responsibilities, and then if you're experiencing somebody telling you that you can't have children or that you don't have the right to have children, that would be a place where you may want to work with the protection and advocacy organization in your state. So that's also called PNA. Here in Oregon, that's called Disability Rights Oregon. I know it's in California, it's Disability Rights California. It's maybe called different in different states, but that's the organization that is a legal organization that helps support the rights of people with disabilities. And then I think, Max, you were going to talk a little bit about that.
Yes, I am. So examples of people in your life that can help you are your case managers, service coordinators, or a personal agent. And it is important to know the laws and how they protect your rights. And people will try to stop you from exercising your rights as a person. So you as a person with a disability have the same rights as someone without a disability. So now we are going to dive into our next round of questions for panelists. So the first question for the panelists is, can you have support in home to help you raise a child? And I'm gonna go first with Raise and Colette. I think I said Raise wrong, right?
Since we don't have children, we're kind of stumped about what to say, but yes, you can have supports in a home.
Well, and so my thought, Raisin and Colette, is these next questions are pretty specific about, self-advocates. I think we're really curious, about becoming parents.
Okay.
So you could answer these questions, these next set of 4 questions that Max can ask, more so from when you all were thinking about it, as you presented earlier, talking through kind of the pros and cons of your thoughts, like you mentioned, needing your alone time and your quiet time. Those kinds of conversations, maybe, knowing that there could be supports in your home. How did that play a factor in your all's decision to not have children? Because, there could be others on the call today that feel the same, but are having those conversations, and wondering maybe how you all talked through those points.
Yeah, I think One factor for us is that we both live pretty far away from family. So I'm originally from Houston, she's from Chicago. And so I think, you know, just not having a sort of traditional like family to rely on, you know, that's definitely a factor. We do have a number of friends that do have children, and I think we're, I think, a support to them, you know, in terms of like babysitting or, you know, just kind of helping with the kids and stuff. So I know that's something that's possible.
Good answer. I have nothing to add.
I think I'm next. Yes. Yeah, you definitely can have supports in the home, but as Raisin and Colette mentioned, a lot of times it may come down to family or friends because there are certain rules that paid people that like people that are paid from a waiver or certain official programs or formal programs may not be able to help you directly with parenting. So we have found some ways where parents have worked around that. I'm thinking of one friend of mine who is a mom who is blind, and she was able to use her transportation option to get to work. She was able to use the same route that she used to get to work to also be able to drop her son at school. But typically, a lot of the formal services that you would get to support you as a person with a disability may not be able to help you as a parent with a disability. And that is one of the parts of our systems that is really unfair because it kind of assumes that we're not going to be parents. So advocates are working to improve on that. But I do think it's important to realize that it is hard to get services paid for by disability supports that help you directly parent. And so things like how close you live to family members or friends that also want to and can help you in raising a child is a really important part to think about.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Let's go to Bernard Crawford next.
Only thing that I was going to say this is the real truth is I was out for Falls Haven, let you know about this anyway. We was out for Falls Haven. We didn't know nothing about parents and kids and none of that. You know what the part is we didn't know nothing before we came out in the world in DC, and we start seeing these people who got kids and all of this and that and stuff like that. You know, I'm gonna let you know, people from the people from Falls Haven, just the clients. Anyway, I'm saying clients. Now we call them clients. We call them people. People, we didn't know nothing about how to make babies. You know, we went to school. We took class. We went to school and looked at the films and this and that and stuff. And later on, they were talking about it in school, and that's why I took up the things from school. You know why? We didn't know nothing about it. We sat down and talked about it, how to make, you know, this and that, and from school. You know what? Only thing part is people don't understand with the person from disability how to make babies. I learned it from the classes, and that's why I learned how to make babies. You know why? We sat down and talked about how you know, with a lady, the woman, how you go with the girlfriend and all of this. No, we learned this. We was out Falls Haven. We went to movies, hug them and take them somewhere and start working. And that's how we learned this. And that's how I learned it from that. You know why? That's what I did. I started from Falls Haven. That's how I started having sex. And that's what I'm saying, the real truth.
So Bernard, can I just in case people don't know what Forest Haven is? Forest Haven was the institution for the
Yes, go ahead.
And it was located in Laurel, Maryland. And Bernard, when we practiced earlier, you told me that after you and your partner had your first child, that you took parenting classes at Kennedy Institute.
Yeah. And
then you said that there was a gentleman who you stayed with, and he taught you some things. Do you want to tell everyone what he taught you? You told me that he taught you how to change a diaper. What else?
He taught me how to change the diapers. He told me how to fill the formula, how to fill the bottle with the powder, and he taught me a whole lot of things. And why I didn't know how to fill out, how to do the formula, the powder with the powder milk and all of that. And he taught me that, and he taught me how to change the diapers, and he taught me how to dress the baby, and how to love the baby. And that's what I was doing, learning all of that from him. And the parents classes I took taught me how to raise a child, how to love the child, how you be there for the child, and how you do things with them, and how everything. That's why I took the parents class, and the parents class taught me some more, and how to be a dad, be a parent, and that's what I was doing.
Thank you, Bernard.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Bernard. All right. So, Hillary, can you have supports in your home to help you raise a child or yours?
I live with my parents, so they help me a lot, which is a good thing. I've only taken childbirth classes to prepare myself, and just my parents are a big support for me for raising my daughter.
Thank you. All right, so the next question for the panelists I have is, I want to know about like raising a kid. And so, like, was it easy? Or was it hard to raise, a child? And how do you take care of a child or children in that regard? And let's start out with well, I could start out with Raise and Colette, but I know you two do not have children, but this was another question asked by self-advocates.
Yeah, we can jump in and just share a little bit based on having, nieces and nephews. So we have 9 nieces and nephews, and I think I noticed for us, like, I tend to be better with smaller children. I think she's better.
I don't know what to do with the little ones.
Yeah. And she's definitely better with the older kids. I think like teenagers to me are like kind of scary. What do you want to talk about?
I do better with anybody that can have a conversation. So even if they're 3 and they want to point out the plane in the sky, I can work with that. It's the infants I don't know what to do with, and I'm just happy to hand them back, especially when they start screaming. But we very much enjoy being good family members to all 9 kids, and we don't see them enough.
Yeah, it's a nice balance so that we can spend time with them and take care of them, and then hand them back.
Give them back
to their parents.
So. And how old is the youngest one? Is probably 10.
Yeah.
And the oldest one is probably 22.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next, for this question, what is easy about raising children, and what is hard about raising children? Kara, you want to go next and try and answer this one?
Sure. I love hearing what Raisin and Colette said about spending time and helping out, because I know as a parent, when my brothers or sisters or brother and sister-in-laws are able to do that, it's so nice. And especially with COVID, I have missed those opportunities to get a break and also be able to see my nieces and nephews, because it's a special relationship. No matter whether you're a parent or not, I think that a lot of these things cross over about what's easy and what's hard about it. Easy for me would be when we share an interest, or when I think when our family does a pretty good job with routines or structure, that helps me as well. So we have a pretty good routine at night where we do kind of the same things in order, and everybody usually, is kind of calm. We're able to read books together. So that part feels not necessarily, it wasn't easy to get there, but that part feels easy. What can be hard is when we're out in the community, things I can't control. I can't control if people are staring at us. And when my kids have always noticed that from a really young age, and they'll ask loudly about it, which I don't care because, the person maybe needs to think about staring. But it's hard for me to explain that other people don't see our family in the same way that my kids do. So that my kids see our family as their family, and they love us and they love each other. And so when people are not so kind to us, it is hard to explain that because, there's really not a good answer or a good reason. So I think that would be the hard part, as well as I also can resonate with just sometimes needing and wanting some quiet time or some time alone. That can be really hard to get, and that can be hard to feel like your batteries need to be recharged, but you don't know when they can be.
Thank you for that. Bernard, next, you want to take a shot at this question?
The question is, it's hard. No, it's not hard for me to deal with a child. It is easy for me to learn that part, how to raise a child and deal with a child. And sometimes the mom need to take a break sometimes. And sometimes mom want me to come over and pick up the child. It's easy for me to learn how to be a father for that child. And it's not hard. It's not. It's easy to, how to be a parent. Why a child need a mom and dad with them and all of that. And mom and dad be there for it. And the child knows that's the mom and that's the dad. And later on, you got to talk to them, love them, and let them know you there for them and all of that. It's not hard. It's easy. You know what? It's not hard for me. You know what? I'm there for mine. And that's what I'm saying. It's not hard.
Well, Bernard, you have 3 adult children. So that's one
Yeah.
part about it. And then
I got 3 of them. One of my son is grown. I had a little bit of problem with that one. Only thing is, I'm not telling the story about that. And I got 2 daughters, but 2 daughters grown, and they love their dad. And my son loved me. And only thing is, he loved his mom. My son loved his mom more than he loved his dad. And my 2 daughters love me more. I'm there for them and my son at the same time. And that's what I'm gonna let you know. That's why I got 3 grown adult and a grown, and I'm there. That's why I'm there for my child and both of my grown on adult. And I'm still there.
thank you, Bernard.
Thank you, Bernard. Right, and Hillary, you have a child, and I'm just curious to know, like, what is easy about raising your child, or are there any challenges, and what is hard about it, if there is anything hard about it?
It's pretty easy because my parents help me out a lot. So when she always gives me a hard time, my parents step in because they know when the limit is for me. And because April always gets her way no matter what. But nothing's really hard about raising her now that she's older. But back in the day, it was hard because she was always used to throw up her food when she always had formula, and we didn't know exactly why, so we had to take her to a doctor and see what was going on. And we found, I guess, I don't know if it was like, I forget if it was like acid reflux or something. I don't remember, but we figured out not to give her as much and burp her a lot more. So that's how we figured it out. And it got easier afterward.
Thanks.
All
All
right,
right,
everyone.
so the
Oh,
next
sorry,
question,
Matt.
we're gonna skip, we're gonna go to like the last one. And that last one is like, I want to know about having kids, and when you are having kids, dealing with your emotions like frustration and stress, and how do you overcome that if you were to have kids? And I know, go to Raise and Colette first. I know you don't have children of your own, but again, we would like to have your input because this was a question from self-advocates.
Okay. I would just say that if I were a parent, I would really try to take good care of myself and make sure that just ensure that I could handle things well and not displace anger or frustration on my kid. I think just being emotionally healthy is a really important part of responsible parenting. What you got?
I can't really think of anything I would add. Other than I think it's probably just something you have to manage. I don't think, like, in general, we're always having to manage stress, just in our relationships with our partners, anywhere else. So yeah, I just think seeing it as something to manage versus it never being there, right? It's just like a natural thing that I think happens.
It's part of life, frustration and stress.
All right, thank you. Honest. Let's go to Kara. You want to
Yeah.
share how you deal with emotions while taking care or raising kids of your own?
For sure. I think taking care of yourself is really important. And like Hillary said, recognizing your limits are important too. It's great if you have other people that if you need to step away can step in. And we've also adapted how we are able. So in our house with little ones, we use, timeout if their emotions are just off the charts and they need a chance to calm down and get back together. But because I have a physical disability, and I'm in a wheelchair, when they were pretty young, they were already almost bigger than me and stronger than me if I was going to try to like move them to a spot when they were angry. So we figured out that for our purposes in our house, like timeout is wherever you are. So if it's in the kitchen and you're throwing a massive, fit, then we sit in timeout. And in our house, we don't necessarily leave people alone for timeout. So I might stay in the kitchen, but I don't talk during that amount of time to the child. I let them try to calm down, and I also try to focus on taking some deep breaths and calming down too. So as that example, I have recognized that a lot of times my frustration is one thing, and they're also frustrated and angry. So how do we both practice ways to calm down and get to a place that you can talk about it and move on, because nobody can hear or listen or learn when they're feeling so stressed out and frustrated.
Thank you for that. Bernard, how do you deal with emotions while raising kids, like frustration and stress?
Well, mine is it's easy and all of that. I do mine's right. I get frustration. I go somewhere outside, take a walk. Think about it's too much on me. It's too much on the person I'm dealing with and all of that. And I go somewhere and then sit down and think about what why my emotion is upset. It's something that's making me angry or something like that. I go to a person and sit down and talk about it and the person give me some good advice and how to, you know, with the kids and with my grown kids and stuff like that. To tell me the right things to do. You know what? You take it is right. You take it and learn it, and you sit down with your grown kids, and talk about it and tell them how you feel. You know why? You talk about and tell them how you feel. Don't understand. Say, Dad, why you getting upset too much? Dad, why and this and that? Dad, why you yelling at me? Dad, why you know, all of this and that. On the part is what I'm talking about it is why they're asking me all these questions and everything else. I had to sit down and talk to them and let them understand what was wrong with me, where I get upset and all of this and that. I had to explain it. You know what? It's not hard to explain it to a grown-up. Anyway, you know, a grown-up got to understand how a parent is. You know why? It's same thing with anybody, from anybody. You know why? It's like from you. You got a child. You sit down and talk to them, and they don't know how you feel. You know why? It's not hard to explain it to a kid, and you talk about it, and the kid understand why you're getting upset about and your frustration. You got to get it out in the open. You can't hold it back. You can't hold it back. You know what? You hold it back inside of you. And they know the next day come and you go to work and somebody else getting on your nerves and all of that. You don't know what is going on. You know why? It's like you going back to home and you taking that on the kids with it, and you say, oh, I know what I'm upset about. I need to sit down and talk about it. And that's what you need to do. It's not hard you talking to your kids and it's a baby. No, you can't take it out on the baby. You can't tell the baby nothing. You got to tell them to a grown-up. A parent's grown up or no parents and tell them, look, I got a problem and I want to get something off my chest. And that's what you're born doing. Talking to another parents, and the parents got to understand why you're getting upset and this and that. You say, yeah, I got too much, too much on me. The mom, the partner that I got, it's not helping me out with my kids and this and that. And she yelling at me, telling me I got to feed the baby. I got to do this and do that. That's the problem you got. You got to understand that where a partner and you and the partner got to sit down and talk about it and work the things out and make a decision. We say, well, I'm going to do this. Okay, I'll feed the baby. One day you want me to feed the baby. I come home, I'll take over. And then you take a nap and take it easy. And that's what you're doing.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing all that. That was good. And Hillary, how do you deal with your emotions like frustration and stress while, raising a kid?
I just, when it gets to a point that I can't handle it, I usually tell my mom or my dad if he's home that I need a break for a good hour. And then I go upstairs, I listen to my audiobooks on Audible or just listen to music for a while. If I get bored of that, I just go out and play with the dog outside.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that if you wanted to.
We're going to skip real quickly through the next slides because we're getting short out on time. We wanted to mention the resource task. And we have a link to that in the resources page, but they have some really good tips written by people with disabilities for parents with disabilities. So we definitely recommend signing up for their newsletter. And I'm going to go ahead and just move us through to the next slide. And we're at the resource list.
Yes. And I think it's appropriate that the first bullet on that slide that you had was saying self-care. So it's appropriate that all of our panelists were talking about ways that when they do feel overwhelmed with their emotions or feelings in a parenting or taking care of a child situation, that's something very important is taking care of yourself, knowing that you've got to got to be in a right place to be able to help take care of somebody else, right? So definitely check out that resource task that Lindsay mentioned, is at the chancetoparent.net. And then there's also the National Resource Center for Parents with Disabilities, which is at the Brandeis link there. And while I was looking at that, because Kara, just so wonderful of her to join us today, because she just did a presentation for them just previously. But I noticed there's also a video at that link there, which is specific for women with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their journey becoming parents and going through their pregnancy. And so their self-advocate stories, there's a video specific to that, which I thought might be of interest to you all. And then other resources are the Disabled Parenting Project on the next slide, and I'll let Kara talk a little bit about that. And she has an amazing TED Talk as well about being a parent with a disability. So if you're inspired in seeing the snippets of her talk, see her talk some more at that. And then also the state protection advocacy systems, just to know about your specific state in different ways that if you are looking into becoming a parent with a disability, you might want to look and see the specific information in your state. So Kara, if I can maybe give you just about a minute or two to talk a little bit about the Disabled Parenting Project.
Sure.
Yeah.
The Disabled Parenting Project started as a research project where we interviewed close to 100 moms and dads with disabilities to ask about their experience. And then we created an online community. There's a website with some blogs and some ideas, but I think our most popular resource is our Facebook group, and it is a place that you can ask questions. It has people with all sorts of disabilities, and you actually don't have to be a parent prior to joining. We have a lot of people in the group that are considering parenthood, or we also have people that really embrace their role as aunts or uncles and want tips on how to be, an important adult in a child's life outside of the parent role. We do have some questions for membership. They're really easy, but they just to make sure that you're in support of parents with disabilities, meaning that you're not there to just, argue that we shouldn't be around, because that's not very helpful. But I think you'll find if you join us, it's a supportive community, and we'd love to have you see us there. Thanks.
Great. And I just put all the links for that in the chat box. And while we've got a few minutes here, if there's anybody that has any questions for our panelists or our presenters today, got just a couple of minutes to answer those. Bernard, if there was anything that didn't get touched on, we're happy to probably take one question before we need to wrap up.
I'll do Bernard's question really fast about what he talked about for the breastfeeding contraption. So Bernard, and then you and I can talk offline if you have any questions later on. So don't worry about that, okay? So if there's a person with a uterus who chooses not to breastfeed or doesn't want to breastfeed, or if there's a person who was born without a uterus, so born with a penis and wants to breastfeed. So if you think of like a bra, like a brassiere that you'll put on, right? So it looks like that, and then you can like put the bottle through where the nipple part would be, and then you could breastfeed. So Bernard, we can look at pictures of that later on, but that's an easy way to kind of like get that skin to skin contact, and then to give the idea that you are breastfeeding.
Okay. I'm glad I heard that came out. That's good. I said I want to look at that after I get finished from one thing, and
because you have to leave shortly. So
yeah.
Let's see.
You want me to call after I leave from that one?
Let's get through these questions first, and then we'll talk later. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So the chat box was pretty quiet today. We did hear about how wonderful a spectrum of parents that were represented on the panel, and being aunts as well. And so we did get one question about, are there any resources specific for parents with children within the autism spectrum? So asking if for an autistic parent, if there are resources for them.
This is Kara. I've definitely seen autistic parents share in the Disabled Parenting Project some resources that have helped. I have a few friends who identify as such. So it would help to know a little more specifically, but there's definitely a community of autistic parents that are out there that I know are happy to share resources as well. So yeah, they exist. I don't know specifically what's helpful, but there are some things out there.
This is about I got my cousin. She got a daughter. Is got autism, and she's like 11 years old. She's gonna turn to 12, and she still got autism. And the problem is her daughter is killed. It's my cousin anyway. Her daughter is my cousin. Her daughter is like, she loved me to death, and I help her to raise her up too, and be there for her at the same time. And the father of her is nowhere around in the picture. And the only thing is, I'm there for her all the way. And the only thing is I'm there helping her raise her own daughter. Now her daughter is 11 years old now, and she still be there, and I be there for her now, and everything else. Same thing with my kids.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Bernard. I think really as we're wrapping up today, the main message hopefully of today is, whether you have a disability or not, or whether you're a parent or a friend or a cousin or an aunt or an uncle, really what ultimately matters is that, children need love and guidance, and that's and you can be anybody and be good at doing that. And that's really what matters. So hopefully these resources are helpful for you all. Please join us in the spring for our last webinar as a part of this series, the very last questions to pull together about sexual self-advocacy. And so we're excited to be able to host that later this spring. Be on the lookout for an email with registration link within the coming months. And if you haven't joined our sexual health special interest group, I can resend that link really quick. Make sure you join that listserv so you can stay up to date on all the cool, exciting, fun things that we're doing. And then AUCD does have an evaluation to share as a part of this webinar. So I will turn it over to Tanisha.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm going to include a link in the chat box that we would really appreciate you completing. I'll also send it as a follow-up email. So if you're not able to see it in the link in the chat box, do whichever one is easiest. But we value your feedback because it helps us in our planning. And we want to know what your thoughts were of today's session. So here's the survey link. Please just open it before we close out the webinar so you can have access to it and take your time to complete it. And if you have any questions, visit our sexual health SIG page, special interest group page that Lindsay also just posted in the chat. And it has their email addresses that if you have questions, you can contact them. Again, the archive or the recording and the PowerPoint slides will be posted on the same website. But if you're on our listserv, you will receive an email when that is ready. All right, thank you again so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you so much to all of our presenters and panelists. You all were wonderful.
Well, I want to thank. I'm glad that I did this. This is great. This is great.
Yeah, thanks, Max, for leading us through. Bye,
Yeah.
everyone.
All right. Don't show
Have a
up. Just
wonderful day, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's good to see you,
everybody.
Erica.
Good to see you all too. Good to see you too, Max. You did great.
Oh, thanks.
Everyone did.